The red state welfare paradox: how Republican strongholds depend on federal aid. For decades, Republicans have railed against so-called big government and the social safety net programs they claim breed dependency. Conservative politicians and voters often champion personal responsibility, free markets, and the reduction of federal spending on social services. And yet, a striking paradox emerges when we examine where the most federal assistance actually goes. Red states, the very regions where Republican ideology is strongest, receive the highest amounts of government aid who benefits most from federal assistance. It may surprise some to learn that Republican-led states are the largest recipients of federal assistance per capita. Studies and reports consistently show that states with conservative voting patterns rely heavily on government funding for programs such as Medicaid, food stamps, SNAP, and Social Security disability benefits. According to data from the Tax Foundation and the Rockefeller Institute of Government, states like Mississippi, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Louisiana receive far more in federal funding than they pay in taxes. Meanwhile, blue states such as California, New York, and Massachusetts contribute more in federal taxes than they receive in return. This reliance on federal aid contradicts the rhetoric of conservative politicians who advocate cutting these very programs. The reality is that many Republican voters, particularly in rural and economically struggling areas, depend on these social safety nets to survive. The economic reality of red states: many red states have lower wages, higher poverty rates, and fewer economic opportunities compared to their blue state counterparts. The economies of these states often rely on industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, and resource extraction, sectors that have been hit hard by globalization and automation. Without federal aid, many rural communities would face even greater financial hardship. Medicaid expansion, a key component of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, is another example of the red state paradox. While Republican lawmakers in many states initially rejected the expansion, many have since embraced it due to overwhelming public demand and economic necessity. Today, some of the most conservative states, such as Arkansas and Montana, participate in Medicaid expansion, which provides healthcare access to low-income residents. Why the disconnect? The contradiction between Republican ideology and red state dependency on federal aid raises an important question. Why do so many conservatives continue to vote for politicians who advocate cutting programs they rely on? Several factors contribute to this disconnect. Cultural and social identity. Many Republican voters prioritize cultural and social issues, such as gun rights, abortion, and immigration, over economic policy when casting their votes. Even if they benefit from social programs, they may still oppose policies associated with liberal governance, misinformation, and political messaging. Right-wing media outlets frequently push narratives that distort the reality of federal spending, portraying programs like food stamps as benefiting only urban minorities while ignoring the millions of white, rural Americans who rely on them. Distrust of government. While many conservative voters rely on social programs, they may still view government assistance as inefficient or unsustainable. Politicians often exploit this skepticism, promising to cut waste while quietly ensuring their own constituents continue receiving benefits, a call for honest conversations. The irony of red state dependence on federal aid should not be a partisan talking point used to shame conservative voters. Instead, it should spark an honest discussion about economic realities and policy priorities. If Republican voters recognize their reliance on federal programs, they may begin to question why their elected officials continue pushing for cuts that would disproportionately harm them. Addressing economic inequality, investing in education and infrastructure, and ensuring access to healthcare are not partisan issues. They are matters of basic well-being. If red state voters demand policies that reflect their real needs rather than political ideology, the United States could move toward a more honest and effective system of governance. Until then, the paradox remains. The loudest voices against government assistance are often the ones who need it the most.